Georgia ranks 10th in the nation in fatal domestic violence cases. 90% of domestic violence victims are women, and 1 in 4 women will become a victim at some point in her life. There's a group of people in Hall County who work hard to rise above these statistics. The Domestic Violence Task Force meets annually during the month of October to celebrate their success. This year's meeting was at Peach State Bank in downtown Gainesville, where Sergeant Bob Watterson received the Domestic Violence Officer of the Year award for his work with women who have taken that first step to escaping their abuser. Solicitor General Stephanie Woodard works daily with Watterson and talked about the respect, kindness, and dignity that he shows with the victims he supports.
Bob Watterson oversees our Domestic Violence Task Force and works daily with all of the officers that go out on the scene. He does all of their roll call training and then works with all of the other officers through the entire Sheriff's Department to try and keep them updated on our high-risk offenders, to keep extra patrols going by to see folks that are currently in danger and currently concerned about their safety. And in the solicitor's office, we deal every day with the folks that are coming in, the ladies and the victims of domestic violence on the morning after and the days after. And I hear repetitively, Sergeant Bob Watterson listened to me with respect. He was kind. I felt safe. He has to go back into their homes the morning after often and take photographs, talk about very personal situations, ask them to open up their hearts when the trauma of that is completely fresh, and share with them the intimate details of what happened in their homes and in their relationships. 100% of the time, we actually have an endearing nickname for him that he's threatened me with my life if I ever repeat in open forum, so I won't do it when I'm mic'd and being recorded, but if you will help me in honoring Sergeant Watterson today. Absolutely, thank you.
Well, welcome to the show, Bob. Thank you for being here. And congratulations on your award.
Thank you.
Well, tell me about the Domestic Violence Task Force. I don't think most people know what that comprises and that it's an intergovernmental agency.
It is. The task force is designed not necessarily for the Hall County Sheriff's Office or for the Gainesville Police Department or even for the Solicitor's Office. It's comprised of all these agencies, which would be the Solicitor's Office, the District Attorney's Office, Gainesville Police Department, Flowery Branch Police Department, and Oakwood Police Department. It also encumbers Gateway. We work with rape response on different cases also. So we all come together as one governing body to help address domestic violence in Hall County.
And what is Gateway?
Gateway is the shelter for battered women and children. Gateway also offers services for counseling and sometimes TANF money to help assist people in getting out of the situations that they're in.
Okay, how many officers do you have on the task force?
We have a representative from each agency, which would be Gainesville Police Department, Oakwood, Flowery Branch, and the Hall County Sheriff's Office. So there's 4 officers that are based on the executive committee, but we have other officers. We also, with the Northeastern Judicial Circuit, Dawsonville also sends people from their county to represent on the task force as well.
So it covers the whole Northeastern Judicial Circuit, which is Hall and Dawson counties. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, tell me about your background. How did you get started in this?
Initially, I was a patrol officer for the Sheriff's Office, and I had the opportunity to become a domestic violence officer, and we undergo 40 hours of training. We get extra training in interviews and interrogations. We also do photography, which are for documenting injuries. Also how to deal with victims who have gone through a traumatic experience. So I was on the domestic violence unit for, 2 years. After that, I was promoted to an investigator, and I was on the homicide unit and also did juvenile crimes. I was participating and actually the lead investigator on several homicides. One of those homicides that Ms. Woodard had mentioned before in the introduction for me actually getting the Domestic Violence Officer of the Year award was one that I worked with her, and we had dealt with several victims, the victim's family and different things like that. And I personally think that that was probably one of the reasons that they asked me to come back and take the domestic violence sergeant coordinator position, because it was a diversified, different types of people, different income levels, different ethnicities that we got to deal with doing homicide, because that's just a broad spectrum, but also it led me to know how to deal with people in the domestic violence unit because, again, it raises different types of income levels, ethnicities, locations, and everything inside of Hall County, which is a good sampling of what we have.
And unfortunately, I imagine that those two units kind of go hand in hand, often domestic violence and homicide.
Sometimes we have had murder-suicide cases that sometimes we've had indications like a domestic dispute or something like that. And on some other cases, we haven't had any type of reports from those houses.
So it sounds like you have some extensive training in domestic violence. What are the challenges that you face as a domestic violence officer? What does it take to do your job?
Some of the challenges is what our speaker has spoken about. Being trapped in a situation, I think she described a euphoric feeling or almost a drug type feeling of being involved and linked with that partner and later her husband. She chose that person over her family and her support group. One of the challenges is getting that victim or that person to realize that they are in a situation that's unhealthy, that the domestic violence role that's going on is in a healthy situation, and they don't all the time realize that that's what's keeping them trapped there. Some of the batterers are where they isolate the victim or where they don't let them drive. I can't tell you how many victims don't have driver's license. They don't have bank cards because obviously he keeps them at home with the children. They're isolated. They don't have contact with their family. They don't have finances or way to get to their finances. They don't even, a lot of times they didn't even know what bank that they used. So when they're trapped in these situations, first of all, that would be one reason for them not to make a report or to stay where they're at, because a lot of times we make an arrest of the husband and then 2-3 days later, the victims want to come up and they say, listen, I don't have any money. I don't have a way to get around. I've got to get my children to their sporting events. I've got to get, groceries in the house. And a lot of times, we try to refer those to Gateway, and those are some of the things that Gateway can help with. But in my role, and they often say, I'd like to try to see about dropping the charges. Can I, drop the...
And so you guys don't have a case to prosecute if the woman doesn't press charges.
That's correct.
Is there anything that you can do at that point?
Well, the solicitor's office is really good about going forward on the prosecution of these cases. What we try to do is get them help through Gateway and different things like that, which would allow them to get out of that situation and maybe move in with a family member or something until they get access. But those are some of the stumbling blocks to my job. Another thing would be is that, and we call it the honeymoon phase, and I think our speaker had spoke about that too, where after something happens, after it's reported, they come and they sweet talk their way back in. I can't tell you how many times that they say, well, he bought me flowers, or
just part of that cycle of abuse.
It is, and that's part of it because he's really good. I mean, obviously he's hooked that victim up until this point, and I say it could go either way, but most of the time it is for females.
Do you have very many the other way? Like what percentage would you say is the male the victim?
Probably about 10% would be the male
really?
victim.
I'm surprised because you don't hear about it that much.
Yeah, it's not something I guess that a lot of males are willing to come forward and say I'm a domestic violence victim, but we have gotten cases like that.
I imagine as an officer it's even harder to reach those male victims than it would be the female victims because like you said, they don't want to admit that.
Right.
It's emasculating.
It is.
Okay, well, tell me about the services available for prevention in Hall County.
The solicitor's office works really close with Gateway. As a domestic violence officer, and when our officers go out, they have pamphlets from Gateway. It's information about how to obtain TPOs, what the warrant.
What's a TPO?
A TPO is a temporary protective order. And it tells you how to obtain those. It tells you there's a listing of all the phone numbers that we could come up with that would be beneficial for these people to have. It also explains, a lot of times people don't know after their arrest, well, what comes next? We go through the magistrate court, how they get out on a conditional bond. And that would entail not having any contact with the victim, not going back to the house. A lot of times children are victims. We assess them as victims where the children are also protective parties. It also tells them not to make contact via phone and nowadays email or text messages or anything like that. So a lot of those services are available to them to let them know what to expect next. Again, Gateway offers counseling and different things like that. We also work closely with DFACS, who, if that person is isolated from the family, if they don't know where their banking financial institution is and or they don't have a driver's license, DFACS also gets involved and helps a lot.
Well, thank you, Sergeant Watterson, for being here today, and congratulations again on winning Officer of the Year.
Well, thank you, and we're glad to make a positive impact on our community.